You're listening to Little Green Cheese, episode 43. Well, welcome to the Little Green Cheese podcast. I'm Gavin Weber, and this podcast is where you can learn about cheese making at home. Well, this week's episode, we're going to be talking about adding things to your cheese, so things like herbs and spices. Now, I've been making cheese with herbs and spices since way back in 2009, and one of the very first cheeses that I made was a Wensleydale. And in that Wensleydale, I added sage, a layer of sage in the middle of the cheese. Now, I had to make sure that the sage, it was freshly picked from my garden. So what I did, I put it on a tray in my just normal kitchen oven and at 120 degrees Celsius, and I let that dry out for 5 minutes. Now, that killed any bacteria. I'd washed and dried the sage beforehand, of course. They shriveled a little bit, but that doesn't matter. That's kind of what you're trying to do. You're trying to lock in the flavour of the sage and let it permeate through your cheese. So I found that that was a fantastic addition. So I was a little bit more excited to try something different. So that Wensleydale and sage recipe is available over at littlegreencheese.com. So you can find that. The next cheese I made was a Pyrenees with green peppercorns, which is very similar to my Farmhouse Cheddar cheese, which I made a video tutorial about. And within that video, you'll see me adding in red peppercorns in that case. The green ones are a little softer. You can get those you can buy it in a small tin, and you can add that to your recipe. Now, what I basically do is I add half a cup of water to a small pot that I have, and then I add in the peppercorns. I think it's about 2 tablespoons. I'm not too sure. I'll have to check the recipe. And I let that simmer for 15 minutes, and that softens the peppercorns. Don't use black peppercorns. They're just too hard for cheese making. Use the softer green or red that are stored in liquid in a jar. I find those a lot easier to use in cheese making. So that was a spice that I used. Another spice that I've used in cheese making is I've converted a Monterey Jack into what's known as a pepper jack. Now, what I did there was I used dried chili flakes. So I had grown some jalapeno chili peppers in my garden, and I picked those and I dehydrated them. So let them dry out, took the seeds out of them. So I'm only using the skin of the chili, so that the flesh, of the chili, not the seeds. And what I do is I then grind that into chili flakes, so not a powder, but flakes. And basically it's just crushing them with a mortar and pestle. And what I do is I add 1 teaspoon of the dried chili flakes to half a cup of water, simmer that for 15 minutes to kill any bacteria, and then add the water before I add the culture to the cheese during the normal cheese making process. And then I add the chili flakes themselves during the milling process of the cheese. So it's a nice tangy, spicy cheese. So that's called pepper jack. So that's fantastic with, I actually make beer here as well. So I make a lovely cerveza that I call Aztec Gold, and basically it's a Cooper's beer kit, cerveza beer kit, and I add 500 grams of light malt to it and don't add any other sugar. So it's a nice beer, very light on the hops, and it goes well with pepper jack. It's very, very delicious. Some of the other ones I've done, I've made Farmhouse Cheddar with cumin seeds and caraway seeds. I've done the same sort of thing. So I used a teaspoon. Actually, I used 2 teaspoons in that instance of cumin seeds. So that kind of equivalent out to a very similar, and I called it Kamainekas, which Kamainekas is cumin cheese in Dutch. And I have a recipe for that cheese in my cheese making ebook, Keep Calm and Make Cheese. So there's a recipe for Kamainekas there, which is just a variation on Farmhouse Cheddar. Now, traditional Kamainekas is usually a Gouda, which is a washed curd cheese. So during the cheese making process, you actually remove most of the whey after you've let the curds form, and you add warm water to it. And what it does, it lowers the overall acidity of the cheese, makes it a nice, softer, smoother cheese. So you can add cumin seeds into that, and that's called Kaminikas. You can do the same thing with a Havarti. I've got a recipe for Havarti, which I'm going to be making soon. So I'm thinking of adding in cumin seeds to that to make a traditional, proper Kaminikas, which, as I mentioned, is from the Netherlands. It's a lovely cheese. Anyway, you're probably wondering what sparked the conversation for this episode. It was actually a voicemail, which I'll play now. I don't usually play those in this part of the episode, but anyway, here goes. It's from Wayne, I think, from the US. Let's just play that.
Hi, Gavin. My name is Wayne. I used to make cheese when I was little with my mother and my oma. We're Dutch, so that's what we did. One of my favorite cheeses was a spiced Gouda. I was wondering if you could show me how to do spiced Gouda and maybe some Havarti. That's also one of my favorites. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Wayne. Appreciate it, mate. What I will do is the next video tutorial that I whip up, I am going to try spiced Gouda. So I'll attempt to make that the next few weekends, and we'll put the video together and we'll see how we go. But thanks very much for your question, Wayne, and observation. Yes, spiced Gouda or Kaminikas is a very, very nice cheese. But there is a variation on that. As I mentioned, I did make another video tutorial was just for Farmhouse Cheddar with peppercorns, but you can substitute the peppercorns with cumin and make a basic form of Kaminikas or a spiced Gouda. But yeah, I'll use a traditional Gouda recipe because I don't have that type of cheese or Havarti in my repertoire of cheese making video tutorials. So thanks for the prompt, and that has helped me figure out what the next one should be. I'm going to skip the news section today. I've got so many questions, so let me get through this massive backlog I've got here because I want to be there for you during your cheese making journey. I want to be able to help you out. So the first question is from Denis, and Denis is from Gingin in Queensland. He says, "G'day Gavin, I'm just starting out on a cheesemaker's journey. I have collected some gear, some stainless steel boilers, thermometers, and etc., and made a couple of soft cheeses. I realise that to make any semi-hard or hard cheeses, my next thing is to set up a cheese fridge. I have a camping fridge / freezer I thought I could use to start, and I've read about plug-in thermometers on your webpage and have a couple of questions. First one is, do you sell thermostats? And how much are they? Could I use them for heating control when I make the cheese? I'll have an old electric boiler that doesn't have a thermostat, just flat out. I can use a handheld thermometer, and I manually switch it on and off, but the controller would make life a lot simpler. Cheers for now, Denis." Well, Denis, yes, good news. I do have a external plug-in thermostat that you can use for heating and cooling, which you can do. I've actually made a video, so you can pop over to littlegreenworkshops.com.au and go into the cheese making section and look for equipment, and you'll see the external cheese fridge thermostat. The instructions are on the box, are in Chinese, so it makes it a bit difficult, but I managed to work it all out. And I made a short video tutorial, so just click on the setup video tab and you'll be able to see how to set that to heating and cooling mode. So you'll need one for your cheese fridge. So you need fridge in cooling mode and set that around 13 degrees Celsius. And if you're going to have some sort of electric heater set up for a double boiler, then you can set it to heating mode and set that over time. So that'll work quite well. So if you choose not to use the double boiler method that I use, then go ahead and try an electric type setup. I have seen quite a few Other home cheese makers do that and set up a heating element in the bottom of a pot that they then put water in, and then they put their cheese making pot and they fit that inside the main double boiler thing, and they use an external thermostat to regulate the temperature, and that works very well. Increment the temperature up. So some cheese making recipes say start off at a target temperature of around 32 degrees Celsius, and they say over the next 30 minutes go up to 38 degrees Celsius, which is normally very hard to control. So if you do have one of these external thermostats in heating mode, then what you can do is put the temperature up 1 degree Celsius every 5 minutes, and then you'll get up there slowly. So your milk won't overheat, it won't rush as you cook the curds, because if you do that, it actually dries the cheese out when you mature it. So make sure you can increment your temperature of your milk for those sorts of recipes 1 degree Celsius every 5 minutes, and that works really well. So hopefully that's answered your question, Denis. It's a bit of a blatant plug for my external cheese thermostats, but they work really well. I've had one running on my cheese fridge now for 2 years, and I've had no trouble with it whatsoever. And it works really, really well. And they're fairly cheap. They're about $20 Australian. So you can pop over there and grab one of those over at littlegreenworkshops.com.au into the cheese making section. So the next question is from Brian. And Brian says, I'm not sure where Brian's from. Hi, Gavin and Kim. Kim's my wife. He has made 2 lots of Farmhouse Cheddar from my book, and it states that you need 2 tablespoons of salt. But when I found the recipe on your blog, it only says 1 tablespoon of salt. Also, he looked in Ricky Carroll's book for Farmhouse Cheddar, and that also says 1 tablespoon of salt. Can you confirm the amount I should use, please? Well, I have replied back to Brian already, but I have mentioned what I said. Sorry for the confusion. I've just confirmed it is 2 tablespoons for my Farmhouse Cheddar. I had to check out my video tutorial to figure that out. So I fixed up the blog post, and you can cut back on the salt if you want, down to 1 tablespoon, but I certainly wouldn't go any lower than 1 tablespoon, because the salt regulates the amount of lactic acid formed in the cheese. I've chosen 2 tablespoons of salt to inhibit it a little bit and make a more saltier cheese. I do like it that way, but that's personal preference. You can lower the amount of salt content in your Farmhouse Cheddar if you like. I hope that answers your question, Brian. Thank you very much for sending it in. Okay, the next question, it's actually an observation. This is from Richard, and Richard is from Northcote, is how you pronounce it, in Victoria, here in Australia, in my home state. He said, hello, Gavin. I just wanted to say how much I've enjoyed your site and the really useful information you so generously given people like me. I'm fairly new to making cheese. All your blogs are fun to read and give me confidence to unravel some of the mysteries of curd size, times for stirring after cutting the curd, temperatures and so on. All very helpful. So far, my attempts at camembert, how do I say that? I think it's a Chab Chow, I think that's how you pronounce it. Mozzarella and feta have been a great success, according to my family, and a Farmhouse Cheddar is waiting to be waxed and looking good. I suspect beginner's luck and a very good 2-day cheese course are mostly the reasons. Now that I'm trying them on my own, it's a little bit more exciting, and have found your website. I will be leaning on it for advice quite heavily. Thank you, Richard. No, thank you, Richard. It really does. I really do like emails like that all of my stuff that I pop up there for free is useful, and the content has helped a new cheesemaker become a curd nerd, which is fantastic. That's what I'm trying to achieve, make anybody who wants to be a cheesemaker not be shy and get in there and get their hands dirty making, not dirty, get their hands curdy making new cheese. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Richard. And Richard has actually gone on to buy some of my products over at littlegreenworkshops.com.au as well. So thank you very much, Richard, for being a patron of our store. Now, the next question is from Christie, and not sure where Christie comes from, But Christie said, "Hi Gavin, we are new to cheese making, and when deciding to start on hard cheese after some success with feta and ricotta, we followed your post and YouTube video to convert a bar fridge into a cheese cave. We thought all was going well, but over the last couple of weeks we just can't keep the thing dry. This morning I had to throw out our first attempt at Havarti as it was covered in mould and stunk to the high heavens. Besides Googling like mad, it seems the only advice I can find anywhere which relates to raising or maintaining humidity is not decreasing it. Would love advice if you have any. We're becoming increasingly frustrated." I've attached some photos of our setup. A bowl of rice was a lame attempt to absorb some moisture. I'm considering a bowl of salt. Regards, Christie. I do have a little bit of advice, Christie. I had a look at the photos, and it looks like your fridge that you're using as a cheese cave has cyclic defrost. What that does, and I think you might have it on a external cheese thermostat. Yeah, one of the pictures shows that, which I'll put into the blog post as well. Yeah, it does. It defrosts itself and causes a lot of moisture. I see that your hygrometer says that it's sitting at 95% humidity, which is massive. I just went and had a quick look at my cheese fridge, and it's sitting on a nice, calm 80% relative humidity. Now, your cheese fridge is probably fantastic for making cheeses, mould-ripened cheeses like Camembert and Brie and any other sort of bloomy rinds. You could just leave them on the shelf. It's so moist in there that those cheeses would really enjoy that and form a nice bloom. But if you're making a hard cheese like Havarti and trying to make a natural rind, then it's a lot more difficult. One of the things I can suggest, and you may have to get an electrician to do that, is disable the cyclic defrost, because it is making the cheese fridge very, very moist. So if you can get that disabled somehow, you may have to do a bit of research using the Google machine and figure that out. Another suggestion to lower the moisture is to use a box of bicarbonate soda or buy bicarbonate soda in bulk that absorbs moisture readily. So you should be able to get the moisture down in your cheese fridge using bicarb soda in a bowl. You should be able to get that down by at least 10% relative humidity. So hopefully that'll help. They're the only two things I can think of off the top of my head. I think that disabling the cyclic defrost will be the best option. I've noticed my cheese fridge doesn't have that, which is good. It just has a tray underneath. Obviously, it never gets that wet anyway, so I don't have those sorts of issues. So see what you can do there. Like I said, disable the cyclic defrost, or add in a bowl of bicarbonate or a box of bicarbonate to absorb the additional moisture in your cheese fridge. I hope that helps, and what I'll do, I'll pop some of those pictures that you shared with me onto the show notes for this episode. Okay, the last question I'll get to today is from Poppy. Now, Poppy has said, I'm not sure where Poppy's from. It says, my husband and I are skeptical about a cheese cave / refrigerator in the house because we went to a raw milk dairy farm once and their whole downstairs smelled terrible where they kept their cheese fridge. We could still smell it on our clothes when we left. Is this normal, Poppy? Well, I don't think it is normal. Something's not quite right there, I think. My cheese fridge is clean as a whistle and has just a hint of cheese odour when you open it. What I do to keep it clean is I clean it out monthly with using white vinegar, so white distilled vinegar, and I just put that onto a bit of cheesecloth and I wipe the surfaces of the fridge, the inside surfaces, and that keeps any bad smelling moulds or bacteria at bay, and you don't have a stinky cheese fridge. Yeah, white vinegar works a treat. Now, Poppy came back and said, awesome, thank you very much. I can't wait to tell my husband. Thank you very much for your vinegar tip. Your site and videos are very helpful. Keep up the good work, smiley face. Well, thanks very much, Poppy. I appreciate the feedback. We'll do one more question. Ooh, this one might go for a while. This one's from Celine. Celine's from California in the US. She says, "Hello, Gavin. I've chosen to make your Stilton cheese after watching your video tutorial using my own ewe's milk. So far, I'm at the first day of turning. My question to you is, once I pass the turning phase and you said to just let it age for 4 months, how and where and at what temperature is the best environment? I have 2 wine coolers going for cheese in my house, and I have a large commercial fridge where I'm curing pork legs at 55 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 13 degrees Celsius. My 2 wine coolers are one's for bloomy rinds and one's for brine washed cheeses. I have a difficult time keeping up the humidity. I don't have a container like yours for my blue, so I put it on a small wooden board covered with a plastic mat, set the cheese on top in a stainless steel bowl with a plastic lid barely on top because it was going to touch the other cheese. By the way, it smells divine. I feel I make pretty good cheese, but I find instructions for affinage in books and videos leaves me a little in the dark. I really enjoy your videos and appreciate them very much. I'll be trying one of your other cheeses soon because I have a lot of sheep's milk right now. Thank you very much." So to answer your question, what I do when I age my Stilton, and probably the topic for a follow-up video tutorial, but it'll take quite a while to make. So what I do is, yes, I do put it in a maturation box, keeps the humidity up a little bit. What I do is I actually wrap the outsides of the cheese in aluminium foil for the first, about the first month. So only the 2 ends are exposed. I find that helps the the blue cheese mold to not entirely take the cheese over. So after the month has passed, I then basically take that foil off, and it then grows an outer sort of rind, which firms up after time. Sometimes I find that this doesn't work as well as I want it to, and I get this kind of mushy blue cheese underneath, and I have to pull the rind off. But I find that foil method does work. It keeps the cheese together because in my Stilton recipe, it's quite dry, the curds are, after the 4 days of turning. But what I do, I then turn it for the first month, I turn it every day. So top to bottom, so it doesn't, the fats are distributed evenly and the mold doesn't grow too excessively anywhere. But it's a pretty simple cheese. You just got to keep it off of the bottom of the maturation box, because if it gets too damp, the mold won't grow at all. So the skin of the cheese, the surface of the cheese has to be not as moist as you would expect, say, a bloomy rind cheese. So, yeah, and you turn it. After that first month, then I turn weekly. Sometimes I don't get past the 2 months if I find that the cheese has already started to form veins internally, or you can see a lot of mold growth on the outside of the cheese, and I scrape that off. And you can see that it is developing well, then I'll eat it at the 2 month mark. I won't let it go all the way to the 4 months, but if I can manage to keep the rind on there and it's not too mushy underneath, depending on the temperatures of the cheese fridge, then I'll mature that all the way to the 4 month mark and do it that way. So hopefully that's helped a little bit, Celine. Sounds like you've got a lovely little production going there with the sheep's milk, and which will impart a different flavour than the Stilton that I make with organic cow's milk, but I dare say it'll probably taste amazing anyway. So hopefully that helps out. So that's the end of the show for this week. Thanks very much for listening. You can find all of my recipes and techniques over at my cheesemaking ebook, Keep Calm and Make Cheese, A Beginner's Guide to Cheesemaking at Home. That's available on all ebook formats. And you can find that over at littlegreencheese.com. You can also find all my video tutorials You can find that on the video tab at littlegreencheese.com as well, or on my YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, curd nerds, and stay tuned for the next episode of Little Green Cheese Podcast. During this podcast, you heard royalty-free music by Kevin MacLeod. I played Malt Shop Bop and Call to the Dairy Cows.